In 1965, thousands of young Americans were sent to a small and distant country on the other side of the world. In this war that lasted more than a decade, over 58,000 American soldiers and millions of Vietnamese lost their lives. This is the story of a war that a superpower could not win: the Vietnam War. Vietnam had been ruled as a French colony for nearly a century. After World War II, the movement led by a Vietnamese commander fought for independence. In 1954, the French army suffered a crushing defeat at Dien Bien Phu, ending the colonial era. The Geneva Accords, signed the same year, divided the country into two at the 17th parallel. A communist regime was established in the north, while a US-backed anti-communist government took power in the south. Under the shadow of the Cold War, the US believed in the domino theory. If one country fell to communism, its neighbors would follow. 1950s Vietnam. Ngo Dinh Diem, coming to power in the south, was taking steps that would shape the country's modern history. However, his oppressive policies, especially his harsh stance against the Buddhist majority, alienated most of the population.
Meanwhile, North-backed Viet Cong guerrillas organized in the countryside of the South, launching an armed rebellion against the government.
The US began sending an increasing number of military advisors and weapons to support the Diem government. In 1963, the growing unrest reached its boiling point.
In a military coup executed with covert US support, Diem was overthrown and executed by his own generals.
Political instability in South Vietnam skyrocketed. Many successive governments rose and fell in turn. In August 1964, the U.S. destroyer USS Maddox reported being attacked by North Vietnamese torpedo boats in the Gulf of Tonkin. A second attack was reported 2 days later, though whether this second attack actually occurred remains highly debated. Despite this, a major legislative decision was made, providing the administrative authority to direct regional measures without an official declaration. This opened the door for direct U.S. military intervention in Vietnam. On March 8, 1965, 3,500 U.S. Marines landed on the shores of Da Nang. They were the first American combat troops deployed. Troop numbers multiplied rapidly, rising to 184,000 in 1966 and exceeding 536,000 by 1969. The Johnson administration also launched a massive bombing campaign targeting North Vietnam. This strategic air campaign was codenamed Operation Rolling Thunder. But this was a type of warfare the United States had never encountered before. Viet Cong guerrillas blended into the dense jungles and local villages, striking with hit-and-run tactics. The enemy was often invisible. The Ho Chi Minh Trail, a covert supply route weaving from the north to the south, provided a steady flow of weapons and soldiers to the guerrillas. Despite relentless American bombing campaigns, this supply lifeline could never be fully severed. In January 1968, during the Tet holiday celebrating the Vietnam New Year, North Vietnamese and Viet Cong forces launched one of the largest surprise offensives in history. More than 85,000 troops simultaneously struck over 100 cities and towns, including the U.S. Embassy in Saigon.
American and South Vietnamese forces were caught off guard, temporarily losing control of several critical areas.
Militarily, the offensive was a failure. Communist forces suffered catastrophic losses and failed to permanently hold any city. But the graphic images broadcasted onto television screens deeply shook the American public.
While the administration claimed the war was nearly won, the public no longer believed that progress was being made.
The Tet Offensive became the definitive turning point for American public opinion regarding the war. In March 1968, American soldiers slaughtered hundreds of unarmed Vietnamese civilians in the village of My Lai.
The incident leaked to the press a year later, sparking immense outrage and horror across the globe.
The My Lai massacre became one of the darkest chapters of the war, stripping away its moral legitimacy.
The war in Vietnam spilled directly onto America's own streets. Thousands marched against the war on college campuses. The military draft deeply divided young people and their families across the nation.
In 1970, at Kent State University, the Ohio National Guard opened fire on protesting students, killing 4.
This tragic event added massive fuel to the anti-war movement nationwide. Taking office in 1969, a U.S. president pursued a new strategy called Vietnamization. He aimed to gradually withdraw American combat troops, while shifting the burden of the war onto the South Vietnamese army. Yet at the same time, he expanded the war into neighboring countries by conducting secret bombing campaigns in Cambodia. Following long, agonizing negotiations, the Paris Peace Accords were finally signed on January 27, 1973. The agreement established a ceasefire and secured the complete withdrawal of U.S. forces. By March 1973, the last American combat troops left Vietnam. But the peace treaty was fragile. The fighting between the North and the South never truly stopped. In the spring of 1975, the North Vietnamese military launched a massive, full-scale offensive. Stripped of American military support, the South Vietnamese army collapsed city by city. By the end of April, North Vietnamese forces had completely surrounded Saigon.
On the morning of April 30, 1975, a coded message broadcasted over the radio. The temperature in Saigon is 105 degrees and rising.
This was the prearranged signal to trigger the final mass evacuation, Operation Frequent Wind.
That same day, North Vietnamese tanks crashed through the gates of the presidential palace. Saigon had fallen. The Vietnam War ended at a devastating cost. 58,220 American soldiers lost their lives. An estimated 1 to 3 million Vietnamese people were also killed during the conflict. In 1976, North and South Vietnam were officially reunited into a single nation under communist rule. The war shattered America's domestic confidence, leaving behind a Vietnam syndrome that would shape its foreign policy for decades. Today, it remains a stark, haunting historical lesson that raw military power cannot solve every political conflict.